Ladies and gentlemen, I guess I can imagine, I'm just imagining, maybe it's true, maybe not, but hopefully like me, you feel recharged, you feel ready for really what's coming now this afternoon, all jumping in, delving more into EV infrastructure, how that's put together, how that works, and really making sense of it, and really kind of understanding it and how it makes sense for you, and how you can use that certainly into the future. Right, so let's move on straight now into the world of DC fast charging. DC fast charging, a prerequisite for the mass transition to electric mobility. Having a look at really what's happening in Europe, a place where, in terms of EV charging, really paving the way or moving forward, where it's really strong, certainly, and looking at those experiences and maybe learning from them and seeing what would potentially work here in the MENA region. I'm intrigued as much as you are really to hear what this next gentleman has to say, his perspective, and really what it all means. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage consultant from e-mobility, J-Works from the Netherlands, Mr. Jeroen Jonker.
Good afternoon. I hope everyone can hear me all right. Still a lot of empty seats, but I guess everyone is still enjoying maybe their lunch or their good conversations. Thanks to the organization for having me, or inviting me to this stage. I flew in yesterday because of bad connections. I had to arrive already yesterday morning, so I thought, why not have a fun day in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And what more fun can you have than driving an electric car? So I went online and tried to find an electric car that I could rent. And it was a bit of hassle, but I found one. I found a Polestar. But yesterday when I turned up at the desk, I won't share the name of the rental company. That wouldn't be fair. The guys behind the desk, the agents, looked at me like, water was burning almost. Electric car, how does that work? The Polestar, and they called it the Polestar, was not available. So would I want to have a normal car? And I said, well, to me, a normal car is an electric car. But of course, you cannot have that discussion. So then they offered me a hybrid car, because they said the big advantage of a hybrid car is you do not have to charge it. And then I just gave in and just took the hybrid, and I had a fantastic day in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And whilst driving around, I was thinking, what could this landscape? What is the potential of this country and this landscape? Driving between Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and I had this vision, and I hope this works, of lots of chargers and lots of solar panels. Now, clearly, you have a lot of room, and you have a lot of sun. And so why not use the sun to your advantage and have fast chargers on the way between the big cities? Now, there's only one problem with that, is that you don't have sun during the night, so you need some kind of storage. And that is always, that always goes hand in hand, PV and storage. So I had this vision, driving around in Dubai, seeing all those iconic buildings. I'm sure you will find an architect that can design you a nice battery storage, but unlike anything else. So higher than the Burj Khalifa and shaped like a battery. Wouldn't that be a fantastic project? Anyway, that was my day yesterday. I'm Jeroen Jonker. I used to work I'm still working in e-mobility, but used to work for Tritium, one of the leading DC fast charging companies. I'm still working there, but I'm transitioning to becoming a consultant. So hopefully you like my presentation, and then you can line up later on to give me some assignments. This is what I've been doing mostly the last 5 years. So lots of charging projects in a variety of markets, ranging from utility to fuel to fleet, automotive, OEM, and retail. And I'm sure if you are down in Europe, you will find some of these chargers along your way. DC fast charging, a prerequisite for the mass transition to electric mobility, is the title of my presentation. And it was interesting because there's still a lot of discussion about DC versus AC charging. I won't have time to cover that topic because that's 20 minutes in itself. But I'm going to focus on DC charging. And DC charging, for those of you who don't know, is fast charging, is typically from 50 kilowatt up to 400 kilowatt, whereas AC charging is usually up to 11, maybe maximum 22 kilowatt. And also the whole discussion about whether you would need DC charging, because everyone can charge at home. I think a gentleman in the morning panel was talking about that. Yes, that's true if you do have a home with a driveway and a place for a charger. So that's not always the case. Actually, in Europe, about 60%, 65%, I'm not sure about this region, but 60-65% of people do not have a driveway or a garage, so do not have the possibility to install a home charger. So they rely on public DC charging. So just a few steps back, what were the main hurdles for EV adoption? Because ultimately that's our common purpose here, is that 100% of cars will be electric. Is the availability of electric vehicles and the availability of a proper charging network. Availability of electric vehicles, meaning vehicles that everyone can afford, that have sufficient range, and that have a fast charging capability as a car. Availability of charging networks, they should be dense enough with sufficient charge points and also sufficient speed. Now, availability of EVs, initially there were all these fantastic new cars coming onto the market, but of course no one could afford them. They were very nice and very fast, but again, only for the happy few. And then I think Tesla, but also Volkswagen and now many, many more brands started to come out with affordable, mid-range cars with very decent properties in terms of, charging capabilities and specs and so on. This is one of the slogans that one friend of mine at VW said many times: electric vehicles for the millions, not for millionaires. And I think that sums it up. And I think what VW has done is really looking at, and that is typically VW, is looking at the car as a product for the masses, and that means that you have to look at mostly at the battery cost if you want to make that car affordable. So battery costs have gone down dramatically, from 350 euro per kilowatt hour to less than 100, and that's really the target, to even go to 50 to make those cars affordable. So how do you do that? Of course, by investing in cell production and also in battery assembly production, and then have common batteries for several models, so you can have the economies of scale to make that cost down happen. Here you can see because the proportion of the battery cost is about 1/3 of an electric vehicle. And whilst the rest stays roughly the same, because it's a car, so you need a lot of components. Actually, you also don't need a lot of components, like an exhaust and a gearbox and lots of other stuff. But you're looking at the cost. The top part, the darker blue part, is the battery, that the battery cost coming down. And the light blue line is the parity point compared to combustion engine cars. So we're sort of mostly already there. In 2024. We'll reach that point, and then on top of that, you have your total cost of ownership advantages. So less maintenance and so on. Then on the charging side, we can put very fast charging, very fast chargers in the ground, but if the vehicles cannot take it, then it also doesn't make sense. So, but also there's some progress, and especially if you're familiar with the platform voltage. Most cars are 400 volt, but some cars now are on 800 volts, like the Taycan, the Audi GT, and the Kia and Hyundai models. And that allows you to go beyond 200 kilowatts, so 250 typically, not over the whole range of the battery of the charging session, but I'll get to that later. Now, what's very exciting is that we have seen some charging sessions in the recent past where there's actually 350 kilowatts, so the maximum, in this case, the maximum of this fast charger, 350 kilowatt, is reached continuously over the whole charging cycle. And one of the speakers prior was talking about sort of the 10-minute charge. And in this case, actually, this would equate, this is a truck because it's a massive battery. But it's, if you compare that to a normal car, 70 kilowatt hour battery, it would take 12 minutes to fill that battery up. So then you're pretty close. Actually, then you're faster than going to a fuel station, because in a fuel station you often have to walk in, and first of all you have to stand, wait till it's full, and then walk in and pay. So it's actually going to take you probably 15 minutes. Then what I've done is, and this is probably a year and a half ago, I updated it, but looking at the key success factors of vehicles and how important a charging network, to offer a charging network, is to actually the vehicle adoption. And I think former speaker from Alpha Tum was talking about the same thing. You have to enable, and Tesla is doing the same and has done the same in the past. They basically, in front, ahead of vehicle sales, they've basically, expanded their network of chargers. So Model 3, one of the best sold EVs, even cars. Model Y is now the best sold car. It's just quite amazing. But I think one of the key success factors was their charging network, and obviously it's a good car. It's fast. You can charge it fast, and you have a very good range, especially the long range models. Then compare that to Volkswagen ID.3. Lots of green boxes are also ticked for that car. The network, together with other OEMs, Volkswagen has invested and rolled out the Ionity network in Europe, which is sort of comparable to the Tesla network, but with some significant differences. Looking at those differences put together, so on the left is the Tesla network in Europe, on the right is the Ionity network in Europe. So you see it's pretty dense, as you can see on the maps. For Tesla, it's 900 charging sites. For Ionity, 400. There's about 10,000 chargers in total for Tesla, 3,000 for Ionity. That means about 11 chargers per site for Tesla and 7 per site for Ionity. Now, that is not too bad, because Ionity was way behind, but they caught up by expanding their sites with 50% over the last 2 years. So that is quite an acceleration. Then the size of the charging hubs are between 6 and 44 chargers per site at the Tesla sites, and between 6 and 18 on Ionity. Charging speeds up to 250 for Tesla and up to 350 for Ionity. Now, this is a comparison, and I won't go too much into detail, but this is all about, and the takeaway of this slide is all about how many chargers do you need per EV, or maybe turn it around, how many EVs do you have per charge point? And there was a study from Transport and Energy that says it's about anywhere between 50 and 80 to have a proper service and not to have to wait for charging. Now Tesla at the moment is 50, in Europe at least, is 50 per charge point. If you look at Ionity, it's about 150, and it's growing then to 375 probably there's some flukes in the analysis, but it's about the order of magnitude. So this is one thing you have to take into consideration when building a network in any new or emerging region, is you take that ratio, you keep that ratio in mind, number of vehicles per charger. Because what's happening, and more, is that you will see queuing at chargers. Now, I heard this morning there's also queuing at fuel stations here in the Emirates, as I understand, but it's something we don't like. It's something that you don't want, and it will, people will shy away from this if they see these kind of pictures. So you really have to, you have to tackle that and make sure that there is enough charging infrastructure available. Again, making the balance or the judgment whether you need more public infrastructure, more home infrastructure, but you don't want to be queuing for your charging session. Another interesting development is with the fuel companies, and I specifically put this slide in because obviously, you're familiar with fuel stations. The difference is that if you have a charging hub, it's just charging. A fuel station, of course, sells fuel, but also is usually a convenience store, and there's a lot more at stake there. So what's happened in Norway and in the Netherlands, so the top one is Circle K in Norway, the bottom one is Shell in the Netherlands. They've started to take out fuel stations, so fuel pumps, and replace them. So rather than add them, to replace them by chargers. And the reason is, okay, the size perhaps was not, of the size was not big enough to add stations, but it's more that they didn't, so the utilization of the fuel pumps was going down for the first time in 80 years or whatever. And so also the sales of coffee and sandwiches and so on was going down. So literally replacing fuel pumps with chargers. So the last couple of slides, I wanted to talk about what's happening in Europe and just give some examples of charging hubs and the challenges that go with developing and implementing those charging hubs. So this is what you see quite a lot already. That's more than 10, probably 20 charge points on one location, at one location. This is a nice example of, okay, you can argue, is this marketing? But they've done it. It's an 18 charge point hub from Shell. They converted an existing fuel station, took everything out, and then basically put this in place, and also have amenities like shops, and a Costa Coffee is in that same building. This is more in the fleet market, but you can see there are typically typical number of chargers at 30, 40, 50. That is becoming quite normal. Ecotricity, Tesla, combinations of brands that come together on a site and share the space and share the power and have their own offering, 30 chargers there. This is a very nice one in the UK, GridServe. I really advise you to have a look at that online. It's a fantastic example of how you would design and implement a charging hub and not only get the best revenue in terms of kilowatt hour sales, but also retail sales, because this building on the right has coffee and a supermarket and a gym, meeting facilities. And all brought together in a very nice environment where you would like to spend some time rather than where you want to move away as quickly as possible. So look that up, GridServe. Then also very nice Circle K in the Nordics, teamed up with Ionity, Tesla, and Mur. 46 charge points on one site. EnBW, one of the leading CPOs in Germany, putting together a site of 52 charge points. And this is one of my favorites. It looks like the Jetsons, it would really fit into the architecture, I would say, of this region. It's really super modern. It's super convenient. Sortimo, again, Google it. It's good fun. 72 charge points. And then, of course, the granddaddy of charging, Tesla, 128 charge points, solar panels, and so on. So what are the main challenges? And I've got 1 minute and 30 seconds left, so I hope I'm gonna get there in time. First of all, aligning your investments with your revenues that you get from a site like this. Now, this site looks fantastic, and it's probably every EV driver's dream, but it's every CPO's nightmare, because you have lots of investment in the ground, and the cars are not there yet. So that's really not the best situation. So you have to align those two. And the second one is, where do you get your power from? You don't need the power all the time, but how do you get the power, and how you get the power to the cars, and also have enough plugs available so that you don't get the queuing that you saw before. So first of all, align investments and revenues over time. So this is just one example, but there are many charging systems that that accommodate that, so that you start with maybe 2 chargers, then expand. So what you see here, for example, the cabling is already in the ground. It's just not in use. And then you can here these boxes. And then you can, once the traffic comes, and once you have your utilization at the right level, you can then expand the site, and that's exactly what Ionity has been doing. That's why they could roll out 50% more capacity in only 2 years. Yeah, so this is basically how you do that. Then challenge number 2, providing peak power with limited on-site grid connection. I'm not sure in how far that is an issue in this region, but in Europe it definitely is. It's almost imperative that you start to use energy storage systems, battery, and so on. And also to have enough plugs available for the cars. You need some kind of load balancing if you don't want to have people queuing at your site. So those 2 elements, so storage and load balancing, are extremely important. That's my last slide. No, it's not. Do I have time? For 2 more minutes.
Depends what for.
What's that?
Depends what for. Time for what? For a couple of questions, or?
No.
For last slide?
We can do
tap dance? I don't know what.
we can do this, and then we can do the questions during the panel discussion.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you're okay with that. It's actually quite important, because you see the chargers can give you 300, 350, even 400 kilowatt of power, but the cars cannot take it. Now these are actual charging curves of 37, which there are more now on the market, but 37 cars on the market from 0 to 100 state of charge. Now you see that this is the 150 kilowatt mark. So you see quite only like 3 cars can make it more, 3 or 4 cars, more than 150 kilowatt. Now, if you then look at most of the charging sessions in Europe take place between 33 and 75% state of charge. Never between 0 and 100. So if you then cut that in half, you see that actually a lot of the cars cannot take more than 150 at like 80, 90% of the time. Now, this is a very interesting and important consideration when putting charging infrastructure in the ground, because ultimately you want people to be able to charge, you want to have a plug available, but you don't necessarily need always 200 or 300 kilowatt. So that is sort of the summary of the challenges and how to potentially tackle them. That was my last slide.
Ladies and gentlemen, ladies.
I don't know. Doesn't work.
Ladies and gentlemen, there we are. Fantastic.
Yep, good.
I'm going to ask you not to leave the stage, because I believe you're actually part of this next session.
I am.
So please, I'm going to ask you to take a seat.
Thank
it's
you.
Potluck. Hopefully, it's the one where your image is. We'll see if it's actually him sitting where he should be sitting. We'll find out. Right, we move on now to, as I mentioned earlier on, EV infrastructure this afternoon. This is what we're going to delve into more about. And again, as we did at the beginning of the morning, we had a kind of overview, looking at the landscape of what's really going on right now, trying to make sense of that and use those ideas for the future. We're going to do that again right now with the EV infrastructure as well. So please welcome to the stage right now the moderator, the man who's going to again shape this conversation in the right way forward. Please welcome management consultant of DXB Management and Strategy in Germany, Mr. Wolf Schlachter.
So good afternoon. Thanks for joining this panel today, and I would like to say thank you also to Jeroen, who was quite active, also with some slides, what I've seen. Very proud because, well, I was one of the founders of Ionity at this time, so I know nearly each of these sites been presented there, but we don't want to talk about the past, or maybe a little bit today, let's see. We want to see what's going on in the region, well, from, let's say, starting in Jordan in the north, going down to Saudi Arabia, the UAE, even going to Oman and the GCC countries, and maybe further. Let's see. So I would like to introduce today four further people. So Christian Hahn from Hubject, also from Germany. Applause.
Yes, yeah, I see it.
So, Jeroen, I think you have to move a little bit because we have the slides here. Christian, also one, please. So then we are aligned. So Klaus Praklow, please. Chairman, Sharon, Germany. And next one, Ali Gage, CCO, Chief Commercial Officer of Katec in UK. Welcome, Ali. And last but not least, Ahmed Abdu. Hello, Product Marketing Director, ABB in UAE. So welcome on stage. I think we start with a short intro of, well, except Jeroen, he made it quite well, I must say. So maybe Christian, would you like to start with you a little bit? What are you doing? Where do you come from? And yeah, all about what's Hubject.
Sure, we're happy to do so. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Christian Hahn, and I'm representing a company called Hubject. And what is Hubject doing? We are trying to connect all the wonderful different charging networks we are seeing nowadays in place all over the world, right? We see, due to the uptake of e-mobility, of course, there's a lot of interest of investors investing in the charging network. And just to let you know, right now in countries like France or Norway or Germany, we have several hundreds, in Germany even more than 1,000 of these charging network operators. So therefore we believe it makes a lot of sense to connect all these companies with each other. We're operating a so-called B2B roaming platform. In addition to this, we are very much pushing forward latest technologies. Plug and charge is something we believe in, making charging more seamless but also more secure, right? We know that this is a big challenge for the future. And yeah, very happy to be here. Thank you.
Klaus, please.
Next, Salam alaikum, Klaus Praklow from the Charin Interface Initiative, Charin. I'm the founder, it's almost 8 years ago, and chairman of that organization. And at those times, we decided to bring industry together to foster the EV rollout and to support global standard distribution. So we have been selected technology partner of EVIS, so we are proud of, started last year, so it's our second turn today. We have currently more than 300 members. Some of those are here, so we have Tritium, Hubject, and many others, and with a global footprint and a cross-industry setup, so we align the industry worldwide. And we started with the typically car hubs like Korea, Japan, China, North America, Europe, and now it's time to go Middle East, and that is the opportunity. We are happy to announce today that Ahmed Ebambali will be our managing director by today with an office in Dubai. We have already those offices worldwide, and yeah, for me it's an endeavor to start into new challenges.
Thank you. Ali.
Thank you. Pleasure being here. I'm Ali Gate, the CCO for CATEC. CATEC, we started in 2018 in Abu Dhabi as an e-mobility provider. With growing demand from electric vehicles, we are looking to deploy and manage and operate the reliable electric vehicle infrastructure that is required across the Emirates. We have been working with partners, deploying the network, looking after the infrastructure as well as maintaining it. We currently operate across UAE, UK, and Jordan. We soon will have our offices in Saudi Arabia as well, as the market is expanding. So it's been great to working with some of the strong players in the market, such as Tesla, which we have been deploying their infrastructure across the whole UAE for almost around 85% of the infrastructure and managing on their behalf.
Ahmed.
Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Ahmed. I'm from ABB. I'm leading the e-mobility division in the Middle East and Africa. I'm based in Dubai.
Nice. Yeah, moving back, maybe make some comparisons first before we start into having some outlooks. We started in the, let's say, EV charging business almost 10 years ago, in the first projects in Central Europe and also, well, a little bit in the US. And one of the first guys was Elon Musk, offering kind of a fast charger in the public session. How do you feel does it look like here in the region? Jeroen, you just mentioned from your side, you came with a plug-in hybrid today, or you tried to drive one. So what's your impression? Because I have heard that you haven't been so often here in the region. And is it the first time for you?
Yeah, I was in Dubai many times, but only at the airport. So yesterday was the first time I spent a day in the region, and because I had a hybrid, I didn't have to charge, so I didn't try to find charging spots. But I thought it was striking that you do see a few Teslas, but really a handful, and yeah, like it was maybe 10 years ago in Europe. And then I saw one Mercedes EQE, and that was it. That were all the electric cars that I saw yesterday, and I've got an eye for it. It's like, probably like you you spot every electric car. But I'm sure that will change. But so yeah, so and also the experience I had with the rental company. Yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done. 1% I heard this morning of cars are electric. I would be surprised, because I thought, I saw, what was it, maybe 7, 8 EVs, and I saw thousands of other cars. But anyway, that's new cars probably. So anyway, so I think indeed, and there's challenges, but there's also opportunity. There's opportunity to learn from the past, from the old EV world, which is Europe, still the biggest market, at least in terms of charging. Now, America will overtake that. But I also see the potential to sort of leapfrog. If you have a blank sheet, you don't not only have to make the same mistakes, but you can really look into new technology and thinking what I sort of showed. The potential you have with solar and then storage and then I think you can sort of leapfrog some of the stuff that we need to be done. And also all the interoperability and your payment systems and so on. You can probably plug your standard plug. You can probably go like, okay, yeah, no, let's not do that anymore. Let's just standardize. We have all the same goal. We want to have that transition done and as quickly as possible. Let's standardize. Let's agree. Let's come together as a community, not to fight over standards or who has the best system. But I think that is an opportunity you have, because you're just starting.
So talking about open standards, what you mentioned, especially talking about some activities what we had in the very first beginning in Europe and the US, especially in the US as well, not. This was the usage of different, let's say, charge point networks. So I had one card, or I had 10 cards in my pocket, and had to choose which one can I use. So from that point of view, I think, well, it's a chance not to make the same mistakes what we have done, let's say, 10 years ago. Even the topic of app charging and so on, to avoid some how we say, major mistakes. Christian, how do you look like on that? Because it's also roaming relevant, so jumping from one network to the other, and even Tesla has opened the network in Europe last year, especially on, I would say, nearly almost, well, the most important chargers, some not, but the new ones are mainly all open for even a BMW or a Audi or Mercedes driver.
Yeah. So great question, both. Thank you. So indeed, we believe that interoperability, as mentioned, is a very important success factor. And why do we believe in this is because it generates a lot of opportunities, right? And especially seeing now this region investing more and more into e-mobility, of course, also raises questions on what kind of products shall I buy, what are the best systems I should use, which partners I can rely on. And I think that is exactly what we already have seen in other markets, that interoperability is creating the possibility to find the best partner working with, but it's also not creating any kind of login effect, right? What we're seeing right now in a lot of European markets, for example, is that companies have the tendency to suddenly, after a couple of years, changing their software systems, which they're using for operating their charging stations. And of course, that would be a very messy situation if interoperability would not in place, because then you would need to invest again into hardware as well. And avoiding this by relying on globally standardized products and services, of course, is a huge opportunity. Do we see roaming quite soon in the region? Of course, I would like to do so, for sure, and we are happy to support you on this. But on the other hand, of course, we also see that a lot of questions are maybe need to be solved before. On the one hand, of course, we need to have more local networks in place. Right now, I think we see a lot of very interesting ideas around setting up new charging networks by public and private investors, and that makes a lot of sense. And a couple of weeks ago, I was also attending another conference here in Abu Dhabi as well, and I've seen this wonderful, huge map of all the railway lines which will be invested in the next couple of years, running all around the region. And I'm quite sure that also quite soon we will see a very similar map with fast charging networks all around this region as well. And quite often we will see, like in many other markets, they will be operated by different companies, because normally there's not one company who can spend all the budgets in doing so. And therefore, as soon as we see more networks, of course, interoperability becomes a key requirement to make sure that EV drivers, and that's what it's about, right? We want to offer them a great customer experience, and therefore the customer experience becomes better if they can easily access all the networks around. So therefore, yes, I believe it will happen. Let's see about the speed of the adoption, but I'm quite sure that it will happen sooner than later.
So I was in Saudi Arabia last year in November, also moderating a panel, and I heard a lot about, as you mentioned, Christian, customer experience on the one hand side, on the other side, regulation, standardization. So this is especially a really tough word, especially these regulation topics. Klaas, you are daily working on these topics worldwide with Charin, and you are, let's say, trying to build these kind of, let's say, easy approaches for charge point operators, or even from the customer side, give the customer more experience on, well, functionalities during the charging session. Can you introduce a little bit how is it going, especially in the region? Because I know you have been here in the region also several times. Do you see any improvements or some activities on that?
Yeah, first, thanks for that question. First, we see what is necessary for that speed Christian is advocating for. That is to agree on standards. And from my personal history, so when we decided in Europe in 2014 to make the combined charging system as mandatory, so that was immediately blowing the industry to say, okay, we can trust in technology. And that is on both sides. It's on the charger side, on the vehicle side, on the service supplier side. And that is to get trust into technology is very important, and to harmonize that all over the world. We started with Charin in the different regions. So we had an agreement with North America. So the government supports that with a funding program. We had the initiative in Europe, and we see several Asian activities like Korea. They are committed to their technology. We are going to Taiwan. And so we see that is a trustable technology. We have powerful members within our association. Probably that is mainly 80% of the knowledge of the world is aggregated within the Charin Association, and out of that community, so we are creating new systems. We are asking for new requirements, and what we identify is, so we need some guidance from politics to give the mainstream. We support with our knowledge, and as soon as that rules are clear, so we have the free industry competition, trusting on one network. So probably I go back to Jeroen's figures. So you have these bloody 10,000 over there. Meanwhile, we have 52,000 CCS chargers in Europe. You see, so from 10,000 Tesla, which has been the market lead, so that is now overtaken by the CCS. Tesla is easily adopting to the technology. We have combined 60,000, and that sees, so if we combine industry, we create infrastructure, and we create trust for the OEMs, and at the end for the customer, and they have to like the product, and so we have a lot to do because the standards still having some holes within, and so we fill that with all our experience, and we are continuing that path. And as I mentioned before, we started with the typical automobile regions, and with integrating the MENA region into our network, so we gain additional experience because you know better what is temperature, what is sand, what is specific to that region, and if we collect that all, the humidity from Asia, so the speed to business from North America, the environmental issues from that region, we really can continuously improve that standards, and that helps not to discuss about which standard is the best, but to improve the existing one, which is suitable for everybody.
So we have also two guys here from, let's say, the old hardware world, say it like this, on the one hand side, but I heard that ABB is also doing some software things, investments and so on. And additionally, we have a CPO here on site. So how do you both see the market at the moment? Is there this kind of, let's say, mass market approach already? Do you see kind of a hockey stick already coming up? So do you feel that there's something moving in the market? Maybe, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. Absolutely. The growth in the market has been tremendous. Obviously, more and more people wanting to own an EV. Appreciate that you were saying the number of EVs that you see. I think we have around, not tens of thousands, but we have good few thousands EV in the market. So be it is like most people who can actually charge at home, they end up owning those EVs at the moment, which is a similar trend that you see in other countries, like we've seen in UK in adoption. So as you have more electric vehicles, which is a affordable electric vehicles, which comes into the market, I know a number of OEMs that are introducing it in the UAE market, you'll see the adoption and a lot of more people growing. I was speaking to one of the EV manufacturer and resellers. Actually, they said they brought a new brand because of the cost. They actually, within 48 hours, they have 4,000 orders straight away on the website. So this is, you can see there is a appetite for owning an EV. Now, that's definitely the growth is there, and on the baseline prediction, there is 30% growth year on year is expected up to 2018 in UAE market. Now, where does the infrastructure? The infrastructure, that's what we've been working on with ourselves directly and with our partners to ensure the infrastructure is in place by the time more EVs be coming into get into our roads, and giving that confidence to those EV drivers that they can actually charge at any place, any convenient place. Not only that, having those infrastructure in place, we are working to make sure those infrastructure are reliable, that you don't turn up and actually, again, learning from our lessons from Europe and other markets, and making sure we deploy a reliable and robust infrastructure. So how we see it over time, it is definitely grown. As you can see, there is more people, more organization are taking interest in whole Middle East market. That simply just shows the potential. Yes, there are challenges, of course, but with every challenges that introduce in the market, there are opportunities which we can look into and explore them. Absolutely.
To add on what he just mentioned, being in this market for a quite long time and looking at the whole Middle East, I can tell that it's really a belief inside everyone that electric cars is a reality. Everyone is just asking when I'll replace my car with electric car. It's not dream, it's not something coming in the far future. Everyone's asking when it will come. Still, we have some challenges in the market. Maybe from the cost point of view, as you covered, there is still not a lot of eco cars in the market. Everyone is asking how we'll be able to sell this car in the future, what will be the value of this car in the future, the mileage issues, where I'll charge, how fast I'll charge. This is on the end user mindset, but if you look also on the government mindset, you'll find a lot of obstacles related to where should we put a charging network, from where we can get energy enough, because not all the countries having enough infrastructure or enough excess power to give to this charging network. When you go into deeper details, when you was talking about putting or rolling out the infrastructure in the country, it's a huge amount of electricity, which no one is having this ready. Very few countries, one of them is UAE, but still in the old cities, if you look at old Dubai, for example, Deira and this region, even you have electricity in the country, but the cables and setup are not ready to take this charger. So you came up with some solutions. Even ABB, we are focusing on many solutions to overcome these challenges. But still, I believe this market is very dynamic. Every day there is big change. The mentality of the leaders and decision maker is really pushing to roll out this as fast as they can. Maybe cars didn't come yet with the speed that we are expecting to come to our market, but still we are very positive. And we see countries like Saudi is pushing very hard to have their own local manufacturing and clear strategies, as they mentioned in the last session, very clear targets by 2030 to move minimum up to 30% of the cars. And this is helping everyone to push more for providing solution, educating the consultant, educating the utilities. And lastly, the biggest challenge we have here is the weather. So having very high ambient temperature, having high corrosion, being near to the sea, very sandy weather, this is all also affecting the performance of the charger. So many chargers are in the country under testing, let's say. Everyone is very cautious into doing pilot to see how the business will go. Should I rely on this device or not? One also point which everyone thinking about, the safety, because the user of such high DC chargers, if you look at the amount of current is bathing into this chargers to the car, can easily, let's say, can kill someone. So looking at the end user, it could be my mother, my grandmother is driving a car, going to this high DC charger, using it to charge the car. We need to make sure 100% that it's safe, it's very user-friendly, know a lot of details to lose inside the screen. They are expecting it to be like a mobile charger where you plug and play. So at this level of expectation, all this is motivating everyone to push more into the investment and the technology to help rolling out as fast as we can in this country.
It's quite funny, this safety topic you still have in Germany or in Europe since many years. So each time a car is burning or electric vehicle is burning, you have it in the press, and it's always depending on, let's say, technology or something like that. So I think it still takes some 10 years worldwide or even more until, let's say, these activities has been erased from the daily discussion. So, well, in average, an EV is burning much less than a combustion engine from that point of view. But you're right, these, I would say, safety issues are still a topic. What I would like to know from you as well, where's the market moving on? Is it more, let's say, home charging at the moment, or is it already going into the public world? So public charging, do you start through in this segment as well? So I would say in the US and even in Europe, it began like this, that, well, you started with wall boxes and, let's say, AC charging, and then moving higher, 50 kilowatt. What are the requirements of your customers? Maybe Ali.
Sure. So we have a lot of customers. I mentioned right now a lot of people who purchase an EV because they can charge at home. or they have a place to charge. So yes, we do have a lot of customers working with some of the car dealership that we install the chargers at their home places. However, we should be mindful of that. Obviously, within UAE, Dubai, we have a lot of residents who live in apartments and these high-rise towers. I appreciate they might get their own parking space. However, sometimes those buildings which we have come across, they don't have the capacity to provide charger for every single user, like, any tenant who has a car park space. And sometimes the maximum that you can put is like maybe 7 kilowatts charger among 120, 150 drivers in that building. So there are definitely challenges that we can see. That's why the public charging becomes a very key aspect of this infrastructure. And that's what we are trying to look at, either in Abu Dhabi or in Dubai, in different areas. It becomes where these people, again, for those people to adapt to purchase an EV car, they need to be, confident that they can charge it somewhere. So that's where I see. Currently, going on to answering your question, currently, yes, we see a lot of traction towards, home charging, of course. But the moment those people who live in towers are going to switch to an EV car, then you see they're relying on a public charging. And you need to have that public charging in place to have the confidence to purchase that electric vehicle.
So what I learned over the last, let's say, 5 years, especially in Europe, in US, we have highly penetrated markets already. There's a need for grid, of course. On the other side is site.
Yes.
The site is important, especially on the public charging side. Owning the site, well, should I buy, rent, or lease, or what's the next big thing? Maybe, Sharon, you can say something on that, because you were working on lots of hardware topics and also in this field. How do you think? What's the right approach? Or do you see other topics as well, which are more or less important?
If you mean specifically on the site and site selection and pros and cons of the business models, it's very interesting because over the years you've seen people struggling with that. What is the right business model? How do I earn my money back and then start to generate an income? And I think what was underestimated is the value of a property in the right location with a grid connection that was large enough or could be upgraded. And so I always use the example of Shell. What they did, first time I approached them, like probably 5 years ago, they had a small little team in London, and they were all, making some analysis, and what should we do? And said, first of all, your hardware choice is important, but also, which locations. And they said, we have now decided that we will work with, Allego, which is a CPO. And I said, that's your choice, but on what grounds and what basis? Because you're probably just renting out space, and then you get some money for it, and you're happy, but you shouldn't be happy because there's a lot more potential. You're in a fantastic position as a fuel retailer to exploit those sites. You have the locations on a very strategic, crossroads. You have the entries and exits. You probably have a decent connection, which you probably can upgrade. And you have your amenities on site. Now, not all fuel stations are great places. Actually, in Europe, most fuel stations are terrible places. But I think they're also starting to rethink that whole concept. So whilst there are still a lot of companies, including retail, the classic retail, the Lidls and Aldis of this world, looking to just rent out space, now rethinking that whole model and saying, hey, we're giving this away for 15 years lease. We actually should develop our own charging business, or at least have some kind of partnership with a CPO and saying, look, let's share in the profit, let's share in the investment, and let's do this together, rather than just give away those square meters.
So what I have here in the region for my business, my personal business with DXBE, we have lots of requests on getting data from, let's say, Europe, to combine the data with potential business models you can build here in the UAE or in the region. So let's take a site which has been built 5 years ago or 7 years ago in Europe, in Norway, highly penetrated country with charger, the same in the Netherlands and even in Germany, and they want to have, let's say, they want to compare. Is the site correct? Must it be close to a fast food chain, or should it be closer to a petrol station? Or how is it gonna be? Especially the site selection has started here, and I would say this is a good approach from that point. And I think Christian, from that point of view, you're also the master of the data in case of roaming and those activities. So getting data from sites, you can also see whether, let's say, the greatest improvement on chargers. What's your opinion on that, especially if you compare the markets? Well, in Europe, I don't know so many or less players on the CPO side which do not use these kind of tools to analyze networks and get data out of the networks, where the highest penetration of chargers, how many charging sessions, how many time, and so on. How's it going in the region where you currently have, I would say, a few data, but let's move, for example, to Saudi Arabia. There you have zero data from experience and from chargers. How do you see that? How can, for example, a CPO here in the region, avoid mistakes and can win and even, grow a little bit faster than a CPO started 5 years or 7 years ago in Europe?
Again, a very good question. So I think what we need to remind us is, of course, that we are still in a very early phase, right? And even if we already have some great experiences done in other markets, even in Europe, we are still in the early phase. Of course, we all know about Norway and the Netherlands, but on the other hand, the main economies, they are still in the beginning of adopting EVs, right? So I like to use the German example. In Germany, we have a total stock of 45 million passenger cars, and now, after 10, 12 years, we now finally made it happen to electrify 1 million out of them, which means that there is still a lot of cars to be electrified. And therefore, I also believe that business models will still evolve in more mature markets as well. And of course, you're totally right, Wolf. In the beginning, a lot of charging network activities were very much focused on bringing charging stations to everywhere. I think you also mentioned this here on. On the other hand, we see right now that also a lot of very successful fast charging infrastructure operators have very specific locations, and they don't need to set up charging stations everywhere, but at the right locations. And what are right locations? Again, this is definitely changing over time, because right now we see that great locations can also be supermarkets, can be retailers, can be do-it-yourself stores, can be everywhere. And we see that this is very much connected with the maturity level, but also the amount of vehicles in the market. Because, as already mentioned, in reality, in most markets, the first EV users, they are charging at home or at workplace, because that's just the most convenient way of charging, which also means that in the beginning, typical EV owners are not living in apartment blocks, but having their own villa or having their own house. That's also reality. We see this in all our data all over the world, that this is how it starts. But of course, sooner or later, we are reaching a market phase where other customers will also be affected, right? Customers not having their own house, not having their own parking lots, not having access to their own wallbox. And then public charging becomes much more relevant, especially taking into account that in most markets where e-mobility is starting to happen right now, electricity is much more cheaper than using fuels. Of course, this very much depends on the country, but if this is the case, if electricity makes it much more affordable for you, using mobility, using cars, then of course you have an even higher motivation to switch to electric vehicles. If this is not the case, then of course other reasons need to be taken into account, and I believe, talking about business models, talking about locations, that of course the quality of the charging experience will be a bigger differentiator. Right now we're seeing it in a lot of networks that the quality of charging is, let's say, could be improved, right? What do we mean by this? it starts with the question, what is the quality of the location, right? How safe do I feel? I think especially in the UK, this is right now a big topic being discussed. How safe are the charging locations? Do I feel comfortable? Do I feel safe going there in the middle of the night using a charging station somewhere in an industrial area or not? And do I know this in advance? Right now, we are not yet having that many insights into these kind of questions. The same in regards of reliability of charging stations. We all know that depending on the kind of car you're driving, electric vehicle, depending on the charging station you're using, it works, or sometimes not. We also need to learn more. We start to see some patterns, what kind of combinations are the better ones. And of course, if you're able to share this information with your customer, saying, hey, you're driving this EV car model, please go there and there, because I know, based on the data, this charging station is much more reliable than this charging station. Of course, this will differentiate CPO charging networks in the future, because right now a lot of companies are very much focusing on a kind of basic customer experience. But we believe that this is definitely going to happen, that locations, super important, but also the quality of charging, the customer experience will differentiate companies in the future very often. And I'm not saying that you only need to provide a high quality. Like in any other industry, we will also see the cheap guys, so to say, who are providing a not that great quality, but maybe for a better price. And then, of course, we have premium locations with a really premium charging experience, but then maybe also with a slightly higher price for charging.
So far, it's all about maintenance and customer experience, what we learned. At the end of the day, we are also talking about, installation of new chargers. And what we have also seen that, especially in some European countries, there were big funding rounds, governmental driven. They were all quite successful, you must say. So what we have seen in Norway, they started very early. And during COVID times, I would say the big European countries like Germany, France, and so on, they followed. Klaas, how do you see this for a region where there is big money, of course, and how can you scale this a little bit faster than maybe in other countries worldwide when they started through? You're an old, I don't want to say old man, but you're a long time in EV charging, and so far, what's your reputation also worldwide from that point of view, having a deep dive, what's been handled in other countries, also for comparable markets, maybe in Latin America, where it's also starting, or in Southeast Asia, like Indonesia and Malaysia, which are also coming up right now. So what's your impression?
Yeah, what we see that energy is becoming more stake in our organization. So we started with connector, with technology, with conformance, interoperability. So that is the things we are doing today. And so with these overall CO2 discussions, so we get additional aspects in. So we extended our board. So BB has been assigned as a third board member. So we are not any longer an OEM-driven thing. So Shell is applying for steering committee. We have CPO integration. So we are more and more coming to these global aspects. And so from your figures, you have this nice Unity performance. If you're looking to the BP performance in Europe, so they are speeding up half time, and so we see Shell going to North America, and so they have the power, they have the money, they have the CO2 obligation, and I think that is a combination of not selling the greenhouse gas or buying certificates from somebody, because they are the central part of that. And from the customer perspective, so that is almost perfect, because people are used to go to a fuel station, so they have the service they expect. From security perspective, if I would estimate that every fuel station would have a charger, so I would trust in that technology. And so that is a perfect fit for mass ramp out, and together with these local activities. So home case is for grid integration, for making use of battery, for store and give green energy, and that is really coming from different aspects, from different regions. So South America is full of renewables, so they are looking where to store that technology. The big oils are having the CO2 things behind, and the customer, at the end, we heard it in earlier panels, the customer is used to have that service. And so that is always similar all over the world, and so that is sometimes a bit different who is first in V2G. That means vehicle-to-grid services. That is in those regions where energy supply is not as stable as in other regions, but the complete portfolio of the combined charging system gives opportunities to every area of the world to do some specific a bit earlier, a bit later. And my bit learning would be for that region, give it to the fuel retailer, and so you have your network, and that gives trust to the customer, and that is driving the technology at the end. And the savings can be directly going to their budgets.
So you just mentioned bidirectional charging, vehicle to grid, or other things like plug-in charge, which is also coming up in some countries, or mainly driven some OEMs, which are more or less more or less active in the segment. I would like to know from Ahmed, you as a hardware manufacturer, are the requirements from your customer already on a level where you say, well, they are, because you're a global company, ABB, so maybe you can compare it with other markets. Do you see there some changes, or do you see even in the region some differentiations? Are the Saudis more ahead, or the UAE guys, or the guys in Oman, Jordan? I know that they are driving Tesla since many years, and so how do you see the development in the region at the moment, or where do we stand in maybe next year? This is a good question for finalizing our session in a few minutes.
Yes, it's a very interesting question. If you look at the topic all in all, we are still in our region improving our knowledge. There is a learning curve which is going very fast, to be very honest. And there is some countries in our region which are really leading by their focus, and sometimes they give incentives to roll out the EV network regarding the charging, or even the cars or fleets. So luckily here in UAE, we have many players who are already taking the responsibility from the private sector to roll out their own charging network as a public charging network. This will help a lot to remove these barriers in the beginning. Still, the majority of the cars now is not the first car at home. It's second, third, or maybe the fourth car. Still, majority is on the level of luxurious. It's not the everyday car, let's say this way. Yes, for sure, there is a percentage who are using daily, but still not rolled out to everyone. So expectations from customers is different, especially when they come to the barrier of price, how much is the charger, and for the investor, how much I'll be able to return my investment. So looking at the ROI, with some countries doesn't have a clear selling model from where I'll recover my investment. So we see in Abu Dhabi there is a clear tariff. We see in some countries in the region there is a clear tariff. Others doesn't have yet a clear tariff, and this is also negatively impacting how fast we can adopt this EV. Missing incentives. There is some incentives, but I don't believe it's enough. There is some incentives on free parking, on no taxes, maybe renewal fees is removed, no SALIC, for example. So this is all helping, but people are expecting more and more incentives to go more for quick adoption. From country to country, it's different on technology expectation, but looking at driving habits in our region, we have a very high distance driving, especially in the big countries like Egypt, like Saudi, like Algeria, where driving between cities is something very common. You'll find someone working in Dubai, living in Abu Dhabi, or his family in Abu Dhabi. So he's always asking himself, where I will charge? Maybe driving a diesel car you will never ever feel afraid that I ran out of oil. You know, in the diameter of 5 meters, wherever you are, you will find a gas station, but you will not find a charger. Yep. So driving an EV car is always coming with, new experience, a question. If I'm going to visit my family in Al Ain, for example, or if I'm in Jeddah going to Riyadh, where will I charge? Where will I stay, take a break and charge? And this all connecting the dots. Where should I put my charging network? Location, facilities, safety. If I cannot be in the middle of the desert where nothing around. So this is all connecting together and answering all these questions gentlemen have just added, that everyone is asking himself the same questions. And I think it is our responsibility to improve the knowledge, help the consultants to understand the mistakes happened in some countries, could be from safety, from not following the standard, not from unifying the standard, which is a very big challenge you see in many countries, that always the investor is asking, which standard should I follow? Is it European, is it Chinese, is it Japanese? Because, okay, so how many chargers should I install? And in the future, which cars will be coming? This kind of unclarity is slowing down the transformation. But our rule, as I said, we are pushing, we are educating, we are helping, and we are guiding the countries and authorities to help them speed up and avoid the mistakes which happened in some other countries.
So last but not least, we are coming closely to the end. I must say, I would like to ask a question to you, and maybe you can ask another question to your neighbor. So I would start with you. Do you have a kind of range angst if you drive an EV?
It depends where I'm driving it. In
So,
UAE,
yeah,
now,
in UAE?
no.
Okay.
We are happy that as ABB, we are rolling out. We know exactly where we put our charger with many players.
Yeah.
So I know I'm safe. Wherever I will go, I'll find a DC charger to help me.
And if you should drive to Riyadh?
Not yet. It's coming very soon, I think.
So Ali, you as well? Some range angst or something like that? Or
Again,
do you have to convince your customers that it's not existing anymore, or partially?
let's be realistic. In UAE as a general, we still have that. There is still gap in the market. There is still areas where they don't have the charger is not available. Especially you asked spot on there, depending where you drive. But I think the range anxiety, looking at the other regions who they have a good infrastructure, but the range anxiety, is it still there? Let's talk about UK. I know it's not 300,000 deployed, but still, there is a good amount of charges where you travel. But this range anxiety, that's because of lack of awareness. And that's what I think we should, as an industry, especially in this region, we should do a bit more, making our customers aware of what it is to own an EV and what it is, and the new locations, where is it going to come up, and I'm just conscious of time there. Where is the new locations and what it actually means to have an experience of driving an EV. It's very important. I think it's a mindset. It's a lot of, even for the location, that was a question early on, is about drivers' behavior. There is a massive behavioral shift between driving an internal combustion engine or driving an EV vehicle. So that's what we need to work as an industry on, to be honest. So.
Klaas?
Yeah, there's almost no range anxiety because the battery size is so quickly increasing. It's more the anxiety for availability, quality, access, convenience. So that is what we already discussed. So when I want to charge, is it available? Queuing is indiscussable for me. And so we see that the cars are driving those distances. And if you need a charge, it should be working and available.
So Christian and Sharon, I will ask you different questions. Have you ever reached minus kilometers with your EV? So battery ranges of -6 or -8 kilometers?
So frankly speaking, I never run out of juice, so to say, with my EVs at home, luckily so far. But definitely when I'm reaching, let's say, the last 5 kilometers, I'm getting a bit nervous to find the next charging station. But again, as mentioned, we nowadays see a lot of charging stations around. And also, frankly speaking, my way of charging is also a way of charging where I'm trying to charge everywhere I'm going. So when I'm going to the supermarket, I'm plugging in. When I'm going to the restaurant, I'm trying to plug in. And therefore, I'm definitely not driving my EV like I've driven fuel cars, where I really run to the minimum, so to say. Instead, I'm trying to charge every time I'm going somewhere.
Short answer from you, Sharon?
Yeah, look, I have. I've not been on minus. but close to zero. But always sort of in a comfortable, surrounded by lots of chargers. I mean, I live in the Amsterdam region. There's always a charger somewhere. Different is, of course, if you start to travel long distance. And I was driving a Tesla, and of course the convenience of the Tesla network, and not only that there will be chargers, but I've never had. I've always had. I could always charge. I never had to wait for a charger. I think maybe today that's different because there's more queuing. Sorry, there's other brands now also can charge, so there's more. But then again, Tesla quickly just expands their sites. So no, I think, and it's a real consideration that I now have to choose a new car. And I was quite sort of married with Tesla because of, not only because of the network, but also because of the ease of, the connectivity between the car and the network. You could just tap in your destination, you could change it if you wanted to, you knew how many charges were available, and all on your phone or in your car. And now you go to a different brand of car, and you have to now all of a sudden look at different apps, and it's not connected to the car, and it's very cumbersome if you're used to that convenience. So I tend to lean towards Tesla again because of those two reasons. So
we need to talk. We definitely need to talk.
So thanks a lot. Great panel. Thanks Ali. Thanks Ahmed, Klaas, Christian, and Jeroen. Any further questions from the audience? Oh, we have one. Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. Jonathan Lewis from the UK. Just interested in what the panel, what their thoughts on commercial vehicles, because not many people have been here today, but you don't hear many people discuss vans, last mile delivery, logistics, obviously e-commerce business in the UK. A lot of the charge parks now are being clogged up with the Amazons of this world and the commercial van. So, but I never really hear that mentioned in this region, but obviously I'm sure it's coming. So just wondering what the panel thinks about commercial vehicles.
Klaas, maybe?
I could go that from our association because we have all these truck and commercial vehicles companies within our association. So that is a real, very quick penetration into the markets because the cities are getting closed for CO2-based transportation, and so that comes so quickly. And they are happy to have the technology from the passenger cars. These called CCS charging systems. So that is almost easy if technology is available. You are demanded to change your drivetrain technology, and they all already jumped on. The public transport buses and all that stuff is Amazon is planning huge fleets together with these charging technology. And what we did within Charin, we collected the requirements for the heavy-duty transport, and that was new because that was always under discussion. Is it suitable for long-distance transport? And so we collected a couple of years all the requirements from the industry. I say, okay, this vehicle technology is not speedy enough, so we need something around a megawatt to fulfill the requirement, the driver distance, and the logistic behind, and that has been developed. So we had 2 weeks ago the first connector system in a real vehicle evaluated, and so that is probably quicker coming to market because that is more determinable. These routes are clear, you know where to charge, how long to drive, where are the goods, and that is, from my perspective, the easy one, and with all the regulation behind, so that pays off from the business case more quickly than for the passenger car itself. As private customer, you have always these alternatives for these professional distribution systems, so we are already on that path.
Thank you. Hopefully we're gonna see you next year with new things, new innovations, new topics, and yeah, stay safe. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, hands together for our panelists and our moderator as well. Thank you so much, gentlemen. If you'd like to make your way off the stage, thank you so much. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we move steadily on now to our next our next session. And again, like we've just heard there, I'm sure this is the kind of, what we've just heard there, a session which I'm sure could have carried on much longer than it actually did, like many of the sessions already. And again, remember, everybody that's here, that's been on the stage, that shared their perspective, shared their opinions. I'm sure that most of them are here today, they're here tomorrow as well. Grab them over lunch, over a coffee, have a chat with them and take those conversations forward as well. Right, so we move on now. As I said earlier on, we are delving into EV infrastructure. Now, EV infrastructure development in the Middle East. More about perhaps looking at soft and hard infrastructure, and maybe more so about how it actually affects our lifestyles and the impact of that to us as well, and really looking at the role of EVs in the region. I'm intrigued as much as you are really to hear what this next gentleman has to say and has to share in terms of his perspective and ideas. Please welcome to the stage right now, Head of Master Planning at Masdar City, UAE, Lucas Sokol.
All right, this is very exciting to be here. Usually I'm just in the office, working with my colleagues. Some of them are in the audience and, we're talking theory and all this. But really to discuss this with the industry movers, with the people like yourselves in the audience who are making this a reality is a special treat. It's a tough panel to follow. You have very specific knowledge and know-how that was discussed. I'm actually going to take a little bit of a step back. And although I'm talking about infrastructure, it's from a little bit of a different angle. I want to talk about the ecosystem of infrastructure, which means hard infrastructure, of course, as our colleagues discussed about charging and how to implement all the necessary systems to make this technology real. But it's also the soft infrastructure and all these elements and how they actually interrelate. Now, EVs are an exciting topic. Why? Because they fall right in the middle of all these Venn diagrams coming together, which of course in terms of business also means a lot of opportunity, because these are industries that perhaps in the past have not come into contact with one another, and now they are creating completely new business opportunities that we're starting to explore with several entities within Masdar. So let me talk a little bit about Masdar City and my background. I came to Abu Dhabi about 15, 16 years ago. I had the privilege of working at the Urban Planning Council originally, and then made my way into Masdar City, where I've been for about 5 years. Now this was very exciting because, of course, working for the government, you're looking a lot at policy as well as master planning. However, Masdar City, although it is an arm of the government, it's owned by the Mubadala Investment Corporation, it is a developer, which means it has to actually implement those policies and make those a reality. Now, the exciting thing about Masdar City is it is probably the most premier innovation ecosystem in the world, but definitely has some of the most exciting work going on in terms of urban design and actually bringing in, adopting, and adapting technologies that are being developed all over the world, but now also within Masdar itself. So it's about 6 square kilometers. Overall, I would say about 20% of that is developed. Ultimately, it will be about 3.7 million square meters of gross floor area. So it's not insignificant. These are images from Masdar City itself. I urge you all to visit. It's just about a 20-minute ride from here, and you get to experience these technologies personally. But again, I said I would step back a little bit, right? So we in Masdar City, we're known for innovation, we're known for technology, especially in the sphere of sustainability. But some of the most important moves and the most impactful moves are actually not necessarily tech-related. Maybe they're tech-informed, but they're not tech-related. So these diagrams I love to use because they're about 15 years old. And honestly, the technology in these, or the principles in these, is thousands of years old. right? Because the first step to Masdar was, let's orient the city in a way where we can shade the public realm as much as possible so that people can walk comfortably. Let's angle it in such a way so that you can see in the blue arrows that we angle cooling breezes through the city and channel them and accelerate them to make it as comfortable as possible. Because we all know it's almost June, and we know it gets quite hot here, and the best way to battle that is shade and a nice breeze. And if you're able to do that, perhaps you can extend that comfort season that we feel just a couple of months. Now, what that means is that you can also walk a lot more, and maybe you're not forced to have to run to the nearest taxi or another vehicle. The second biggest move was to make what is a typical development, which is kind of shown in the yellow outline, and make it much more compact. So this also means two things. It means all those things that we're building in the city, those assets, the businesses, the schools, the amenities, are closer together, meaning it's actually much easier to walk to them. And of course, for all the infrastructure experts within the room, it's very clear that if you don't need to build as many pipes and roads and asphalt, automatically you're being much more sustainable. Now, these are universal principles. You can apply these internationally wherever, and even any time or anywhere within time, because these are old Arabic urban design principles that were created years ago. If you visit old cities in Arabia and other climates such as this, you'll find these principles deployed. So the impact of this has been very real. This is an image of typical downtown, which is about 48 centigrade in radiant temperature, but Masdar city is about 37, so it's about 10 degrees less. Even though the starting temperature, by the way, is a couple degrees more, because we're further inland, we're a little bit further away from the sea, right? But you notice we still have the heat. We still get hit by the sun, but it's at the top there. That's where it gets 55 degrees Celsius, not on the ground where you want people moving, as well as cycling, as well as have vehicles as well. So that's a quick summary of, yes, technology is very useful, but you can take some initial steps to actually bring you much closer and then make your task much easier. So those are the passive design principles that are at the bottom, right? They have the biggest impact in terms of sustainability, and they also cost the least. Right? Now, this is very important. That doesn't mean we don't want to do the things at the top. Absolutely not, because they push us even further, right? They definitely contribute. But anyone can do these decisions at the bottom. Now, why is that important? This is directly linked to Masdar's mobility strategy. Right? I'm sure many people in transportation have seen this before. This is definitely nothing that Masdar invented, but it's definitely how we're organizing our system. So walking, and we like to say wheeling because it's very universal and inclusive, that is definitely the most sustainable. You'd need to build the least amount of infrastructure. It's available to everybody. It helps healthier lifestyles. Then we prefer cycling, now also scootering. Since we're talking about EVs, it's definitely a part there. We've seen that happen all around the world. Then we have public transport. Masdar City has its own component for that kind of last mile, as well as the cities. And then we get into taxi, shared car, and then ultimately the last is car ownership itself. Now you'll see, just as I described in terms of sustainability and cost, you'll see the same kind of impact as a stratum as we move through this. So for example, energy and pollution, definitely the cars will pollute much more than walking and wheeling. In terms of health benefits, it's a reverse impact. Walking and wheeling are going to be the most healthy, riding in a personal car less, and then there's a strata in between. Infrastructure costs, most definitely. If you can focus on walking and wheeling, get people to move as much comfortable, make it as comfortable as possible for them to move as well, you can have a much higher impact. So this is how everything in Masdar is structured, and this is how we also structure our decisions when we're talking about street design, urban design, and even vertical development. Because even the vertical developments of buildings has an impact on shading, stations, and how it can actually interact. So this is a kind of an overall transit map of Masdar. These are all the EVs. This is our e-mobility fleet that Masdar currently features. You could see it's a complete range of typologies. Now, some of them, the two PRTs at the top, the white one, for example, who's ridden Masdar's PRT? All right. So I definitely urge you, we affectionately refer to this as the history of the future, because that little guy has been in operation for about 14 years. It was the first autonomous EV vehicle, publicly accessible universally in the world, and it's done 2.5 million trips. So we all love that guy, but technology has moved on. What you see on the left we call PRT 2.0. It's a Navia system. The technology moved into being able to mix with the public. So the one on the right is dedicated corridor. The one on the left can mix with the public. Now we're currently exploring 3.0, and I urge you all to visit Masdar around COP28 and enjoy what that offering will be. But it's definitely working with a lot of the partners and a lot of the innovative businesses that we have at this conference as well. Now we of course have larger scale buses, as well as some exciting pieces like the car sharing. Now I want to talk about car sharing, I'll come back to that, but you can see it's a whole cornucopia of multiple types of devices. Now, at first we bet on only one, but over the course of the 15 years, this has significantly been evolving because people's demands have been evolving and technology has been evolving as well. So Masdar has pivoted over the years, and sometimes we favor one technology to another. But this is not unlike what you would find anywhere else in the world as well. You know, cities, hopefully they're growing, they're thriving, and they need to adopt new technology and adapt in order to remain competitive with other cities as well. So this is our evolving system. We definitely visit you. But let's talk about some opportunities. Because ultimately this is, I guess, why we're here. We're innovating, building new technologies and integrating them. And us at Masdar City, we're integrating them into the hard and soft infrastructure. So eCar is a partner with Masdar. It's part of some of that soft infrastructure. It of course takes, in this case, it was the fleet of Teslas that you can come visit, book with an app, and you can take your own Tesla. Now, of course, this is a great offering, especially if a business within Masdar. We're right next to Abu Dhabi Airport. If you want to pick up a delegation, if you have a meeting with somebody, you get a nice Model X, for example, comfortable, and it's definitely on message with your business and with Masdar as well. But the important thing is this brings a lot of opportunity and inclusivity to people who would otherwise not have access to a vehicle like this, right? Because the entry is so much lower. So now somebody who's never driven a Model X can try it, right? Now if you want to just have a Model X for certain purposes, let's say that you really don't like range anxiety and the nature of your business requires you to drive from Ras Al Khaimah to Al Silla, let's say, and you may be a little bit nervous about making that drive, you don't always have to choose this vehicle. But when it's more appropriate, you can do so. Right? So it extends that offer to other people. Now the exciting part about car sharing is you don't always know what type of vehicle you're going to need. You don't always want to do all the maintenance on it. You don't want to do the registration. Sometimes you may need a truck because you're building a new prototype and you need to ship it somewhere. So if you're part of a car sharing model, you can actually have a whole fleet available to you, but you don't have to make that big commitment to one of these state-of-the-art vehicles as beautiful as they may be, right? The other interesting thing that car sharing pops up is the potential for the reduction of batteries. Now, I know batteries are a lot in discussion here, right? From a charging perspective, it becomes quite difficult. And also we find that many people are trying to address that range anxiety with batteries that can weigh hundreds and even thousands of kilograms, right? So if you know that you can choose a specific vehicle that's going to be already charged for you, you can see it on the app, you can see what the range is, right? And something that's also appropriate, because if you don't care and you just need to do a quick run to pick up some documents, you don't need a much larger model. So this car sharing model, whether it's e-car or other businesses, it's something that we think is very interesting, especially for the e-vehicles, because they allow to circumvent some of those initial hurdles for access, ownership, and ultimately bring down the need for carbon significantly. Yet, since we're talking about charging, the other one is the type of charging, right? We talked a little bit about facilities here and how maybe unattractive some of them can be, right? But the model for charging is completely changing, right? Let's say a typical petrol energy uptick is maybe 5 minutes. Come in, pull in. If you're lucky, you don't have to wait. You get your vehicle. Whereas, let's say EV stations are about 30 minutes. Okay, we're seeing this as a challenge, but really it's also presenting an opportunity. Because now it means, from a business perspective, you have a captive audience for 30 minutes now. So maybe that meal that would have been out of the question is now a possibility. Maybe there's some entertainment that can happen there, right? Now, also this is starting to open it up in the other way, though. So why take an energy station, add amenities to it, where you can have amenities and add energy to them, right? Potentially even combined with the car sharing model. Now, infrastructurally, what this does is if you can locate where your primary charging is going to be, you can essentially channel your higher order infrastructure, meaning your MV or medium voltage, to allow for the DC charging to happen much more quickly and then offer that business. Of course, there's also the potential upsell. You can now do potentially cleaning with these things, because that can be also about 10 to 20 minutes, right? So these are completely new opportunities and paradigms that are arriving that before were not possible. And we're seeing a lot of creative solutions coming from a lot of entities. Next point I'd like to make is about land use, right? So we're from the city design team, which looks at master planning, transport, public realm, sustainability, and approvals within Masdar City. So originally, way back in the day, pre-industrial revolution, you had essentially like a multi-use typology in most buildings. During modernism, everything became super efficient. So this is kind of post-industrial. You had a lot of mono use, right? Because we combined, we split everything off and said, like, this is the best way to do one thing. It solved a lot of problems, but created some others, right? You had kind of bedroom communities, or community in general seemed to go down, which aimed to be addressed in the late 20th century with mixed-use typologies, right? Because people realized, like, no, but where people live, they also want to have some basic amenities, some little bit of retail, cafes, that kind of thing. Now, maybe unfortunately, but we all had the experience through COVID, where we started to experience essentially some of the aspects of smart city and what we at Masdar called multifunction or multi-use, right? So all of a sudden, your den, maybe your office turned into your work office because everybody started working from home for a period, right? The interesting thing is this, if you notice, resembles this a lot more, which also by chance happened to be much more sustainable. The interesting thing about this in terms of infrastructure is you notice that some of the vehicles potentially disappear, right? And this is two things that we're looking at Masdar. We also have built assets that resemble something in between these two things, all right? But that gray area underground is very difficult to use You can use it for storage, right? You can definitely use it for parking as it was designed for. Potentially you use it for charging, but maybe you don't need as many vehicles to be charged there anymore. Maybe some of those vehicles are autonomous vehicles. They can still be yours, they can still be ready, but do you really need them below your feet? Where you can just say, let's leave in 5 minutes, car can be 5 minutes away, fully charged, and actually arrive at your doorstep. So what's interesting is not designing this right now, because many of these things are not fully capable today, right? Some of them because of technology, but honestly, technology is moving along very quickly. More so, it's with the legal frameworks and some of the policies that have to be changed to ensure that we can still develop safely and efficiently. So you could see one vertical plot, which before, under modernism, would just be called our residential, usually painted yellow in our master planning maps. Now may be producing power on the roof, potentially growing some food through agrivoltaic principles off of that roof, potentially growing food in some of those parking spaces that were no longer needed, right? In using UV light, all serving that building. Maybe there's a business, maybe there's a cafe, and maybe some people are living and working within those spaces, much like many of us had to do during COVID. And it's really EVs that are allowing for some of this to come along. The last point is, this is our PRT 2.0, as I mentioned. The important thing to notice here is, yes, within Masdar City, you're free to come and ride it. But this says Department of Transport, now Integrated Transit Center, ITC. Now, we can't do these things alone, right? It requires partnership. It requires that soft infrastructure, which the government supports with policies, sometimes grants, innovation to help foster new businesses. And this is essentially what we're trying to show here, is multiple areas. You need to do the hard stuff, and my colleagues describe that in a lot of detail, and we have a lot of efforts here, but I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the soft, some of the virtual tools which are starting to bring these spheres of business together and really create a new paradigm. And this is what Masdar is trying to do. You can see we're building the hard assets, building the real estate, the master plan, comfortable streets, adding amenities, starting to mix these things together, providing the electric vehicles as well as the autonomous, linking everything together with our government partners and ultimately with our incubators and startups like our Catalyst, which helps stir businesses, put them in the right context, and help people solve the problems that we all face today. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, hands together for Lucas Sokol. Thank you so much. Fabulous. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Again, one more session which certainly could have carried on and carried on indeed. Again, you're curious, you'd like to know more, you'd like to challenge perhaps any of our speakers. You can do that certainly, grab them over a coffee, over lunch in the other area as well tomorrow perhaps, and again, take those conversations forward, because this is really what we're all here for, connecting conversations and exploring how we can use our insights with each other and perspectives moving forward. Right, we jump straight in to our next session. Now you'll see also maybe on the program there's usually a networking break scheduled right now. However, due to time, we will just move steadily through that break now. So on to heavy goods transport in the UAE, but more importantly, digital, electric and autonomous heavy goods transport in the UAE, and really how that kind of moves forward in line with the vision for COP28 and beyond. Intriguing. The man who's going to share with us his perspectives and ideas on that right now, man, certainly has the credibility to do that with more than 25 years, certainly in executive leadership experience in transportation and logistic Industries. Please welcome to the stage right now, General Manager for the MEA region at Einride, Germany, Mr. Robert Zeigler.
Yes, hello everybody who's still left in this dark room after lunch at this time in the afternoon. Thank you very much. Try to keep it a little bit lively, try to get you interested in a topic that is not always on the top of our mind, right? Heavy goods transport, everything that's in this room got here by a truck somehow. Hopefully you didn't. But certainly this is a very, very important thing, like we've also heard this morning. CO2 emissions from vehicles, from heavy goods vehicles, are much, much larger than from personal vehicles, actually. They're very important for customers, for shippers, to look at their Scope 3 emissions and reduce those. So trying to tackle this topic is extremely important, and we're trying to tackle it in two ways. One you see at the front, and that is what we call a connected electric truck. So a fully electric heavy goods vehicle that we build the infrastructure for, that we build the ecosystem for, that we operate. And then following, you see what's actually the future, and that is an autonomous electric truck. And that is a vehicle that doesn't have a cabin. It's a vehicle that's fully electric as well and transports goods from A to B, but it does so without a driver, with all the advantages that come with that in terms of safety, security, reliability, no need for brakes, continued operations, and so on. Now, what does that have to do with the UAE? I mean, for the UAE, it's very important to talk about sustainability, not just because of COP28 that is coming this year. When I first came to the UAE around 20 years ago, this topic was already on the agenda. Back then, this country was full of vision, full of energy, in all senses of the word, and it was about building itself. It was about growing and finding its place in the world, and it has. And I'm very proud that I was back then part of the Mazda project, and I was able to help on the planning of that before it even became into action. But for the UAE, this topic of diversification, this topic of becoming sustainable has been a topic from the very beginning, and it has been something that the country's been working on ever since, maybe not always as transparent to everybody around the world. And talking about transport specifically, it is the fourth largest emitter or fourth largest contributor to the CO2 carbon footprint in the UAE. And that's why we need to tackle it and do something about it. And obviously the UAE has had these great initiatives like Mazda and others that have been going on for quite a while, and that the country is planning also to grow. Now, we've come here to basically present a vision on how to tackle the specific topic of heavy goods transport in the UAE. And let me show you a small video to let it explain what that vision looks like.
A global powerhouse at the heart of the Middle East, the United Arab Emirates now leads the conversation around the greatest challenge of our time, climate change. Host of COP28 and already on track to become the world's largest solar energy producer, UAE is also leading the region's shift to rail through its pioneering new railway system. And now it's ready to forge the last link in a fully sustainable supply chain. Digital, electric, autonomous. Introducing the Falcon Rise Grid, a new generation of connected logistics. Stretching 550 kilometers, connecting rail, sea, air and industrial zones across Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Sharjah and Al Ain. The Falcon Rise Grid is a future-proof corridor deploying over 2,000 electric trucks and 200 autonomous electric vehicles, with the combined potential to save 2 million tons of CO2, all enabled by 8 charging stations with 500 charging outlets. We have a substantial challenge ahead, but there is a way forward, together. Let's turn vision into action and gather our forces. This is your chance to join a multi-stakeholder partnership and make a lasting impact. Let's drive change that shapes the future.
So this is the Falcon Rise grid that we're proposing as a vision for the UAE. It is something that would stretch the main density areas of the UAE, cover 2,000 connected electric trucks, 200 autonomous electric vehicles. And you can do it all with 8 charging hubs with around 500 outlets. So it is not insurmountable. It is something that is quite feasible, and all these technologies exist today, and it's important to bring around the stakeholders to basically build that grid and build that ecosystem around it. It is saving us a lot of CO2, of course, but there's all these other benefits that come with it. You're aware that actually diesel fumes are toxic, right? The NOx is toxic. And with the diesel vehicles that we see in the UAE, the amount of NOx is even higher than the ones we're seeing in Europe or in the US. So that gap is really quite wide. Also, there is a lot of noise coming with these vehicles, and that is why these vehicles are banned from many roads at certain times here in the UAE. And it's something that we also see in other places around the world. And in some places, we've been able, because we reduce the noise with the electric heavy goods vehicles, we've been able to put something in place that we call whisper logistics. And let me show you a little bit what whisper logistics looks like. So you notice that you barely have a sound from these vehicles, and that is why we were able to get special permission to go into cities at night and do grocery deliveries into the cities where you cannot do that with diesel vehicles. Therefore, taking these vehicles out of the traffic in the morning when you don't want to see them there, and taking them out of the traffic during the day and in the evening. So they're not part of the landscape anymore. So the important part is building the ecosystem. I think we've heard this many, many times already today. And this is basically what we as a company are doing. We're bringing together the electric fleet, we're bringing together the charging, we're bringing together the operational partners, eventually the drivers, not to forget the digital platform that is needed to integrate it all. Because to operate heavy goods transports with electric vehicles takes full integration of the telematics systems of the truck, the battery management system of the truck, and the charging infrastructure, and last but not least, the logistics planning systems of the shippers. And then, obviously, we're also looking at the autonomous as our North Star. As a company, we've grown quite tremendously in the past 6-7 years. We're now present in 8 markets in the US, in the Nordics, obviously, in Germany, the Benelux, and lately in the UK. We got a nice amount of customers, large multinational customers that trust us, that are already operational with us, with connected electric vehicles, but also with autonomous electric vehicles. So what I'm talking about is not just a vision, it is possible today. The technology exists, the customers exist, it is competitive with diesel, and we can put it into action and actually make it work. And to give you a little bit more entertainment maybe, but also just a glimpse at how we have done our launch in UK, here is this.
We're on the road to transform the freight industry through digital, electric, and autonomous technology. Now, we're facing what may be our biggest challenge yet. The big switch.
That's the advantage when you when you don't have a cabin, you don't have a steering wheel, you don't have to move it to the other side of the truck. Important case study to show you that this is available today at scale is Maersk. Maersk is one of our biggest customers in the US. We're electrifying more than 300 vehicles for them for drayage from the ports, and that's why you see this one here with a Maersk container on it. It's going to electrify 1 million shipments per annum, 300 connected trucks, and 150 charging stations in different locations across the US, LA, Chicago, Newark, and Savannah, Georgia. This is also just a small part of their fleet. So this is also just a small beginning, although this is something that is really of scale. And to give you an impression of how that looks like when you have a major charging hub for heavy goods vehicles, both autonomous and driven, this is a rendering of what it's going to look like by the end of this year outside the port of LA, where we're going to build one of our major charging hubs to operate the Maersk business. Now, I've mentioned the autonomous electric, right? And I've mentioned how it has no cabin. Why does it have no cabin? Well, first of all, an autonomous truck with a cabin is kind of pointless, right? Why would you have a driver on an autonomous truck? What we do to supervise these vehicles, we do that remotely. So basically, as you would with a drone, but the truck is fully autonomous itself. And you're reducing a lot of the complexity because 60–70% of the building complexity of a truck is in the cabin, right? Steering wheel, seats, windows, wipers, all this stuff. And this is a rendering of what it's going to look like when it transports a container. We've started doing some work on, and this is where we see first applications potentially for the UAE, within the ports networks of the UAE, basically taking drayage out of the ports and then again focusing there on containers, but also doing that with a mixed fleet, both with connected electric trucks, but also autonomous electric trucks. And this is something that we're hoping to still have wheels on the ground this year, hopefully around the COP28, so that we can show that this country is actually doing something where many of the other COP countries have just been talking. And this again to show you a little bit the precision of autonomous driving and one of the important factors in there, you're becoming sustainable, yes, you don't have the driver, you don't suffer from driver shortage, but it's also a topic of safety and reliability, and this to show you that they are. And the amazing thing is that they cannot just do that once, but they can do it 1,000 times a day. And you could probably find a truck driver that is a high-precision truck driver that can do it once, maybe 10 times, but he can't do it 1,000 times a day. And last but not least, to close off, I want to talk about what the benefits are to the UAE of investing in the Falcon Rise grid. Obviously, it helps with fulfilling the targets that are set both for 2030 but also 2050. It can attract complete knockdown investments into the UAE, basically bringing the OEMs here to invest, attract further foreign direct investment for the UAE, but also continue the diversification that we've had for the last 10, 20 years here in the UAE in terms of energy, supporting also the pledges of going autonomous, like Dubai has done for 25% autonomous by 2030. but show yourselves also to the world as being what you are, a global frontrunner towards electric and autonomous. And with that, we hope that the future of electric and autonomous has landed in the UAE, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, hands together for Robert Ziegler. Thank you so much. Fantastic. A great glimpse into perhaps the future of what it could look like in terms of heavy goods transport here in the UAE, in particular here in Abu Dhabi as well. Staying now in Abu Dhabi. EV charging infrastructure policy agenda. So when I say that word policy, a lot of people here naturally may not be too completely aware of the whole ins and outs of this policy. Perhaps a little bit more of awareness would be a benefit, and that's exactly what the next gentleman here on stage is about to share right now to help us all understand a little bit more about what it means, the effects of it, and more about perhaps exactly what to expect inside it. And no better person to share that than the policymaker himself. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage right now Section Head of Environment and Climate Change Policies at Abu Dhabi Department of Energy in the UAE, Mr. Khalid Al-Khatiri.
Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here speaking about the regulatory policy for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And some of you might know that this policy was issued last year in May 2023. Today is really the purpose is to make you aware of the policy, to make you aware of, to have also more engagement with the stakeholders within this room and also beyond to understand the key components of the policy and how this policy really enable the private sector toward EV charging infrastructure. First, to talk about the Department of Energy that was established in 2018, taking on the legacy from Abu Dhabi or Adwiya and RSP, and also focusing on key sectors like oil and gas, electricity, water, wastewater, district cooling, and also with some more emphasis on the demand side management. The DOE vision focus on powering the economy, sustaining people, and also protecting the environment. DOE has 4 key values. One is transparency, integrity, performance and delivery, people and management, people knowledge, and commitment to our land and people. We have heard in this forum a lot about not only the EV but even beyond when it comes to renewable energy. So it's very critical to step back and look at the full picture of the energy transition and how the DOE and Abu Dhabi is a partner for net zero 2050. So this is really a snapshot of some of the key policies that the DOE has recently worked on and published, which help in terms of the energy transition and net zero by 2050. One is the clean energy strategic target, which aims to have a 60% clean energy by 2035. So this is basically mainly or primarily solar photovoltaic at the upstream and also the nuclear power plants. The second one is clean energy certificate scheme policy, which is basically allowing some of the key customers or bulk customers to opt for clean energy certificates through an auction. The third one of the key enabler toward energy transition and net zero is Abu Dhabi demand side management strategy, and it has a lot of programs and pillars that was issued in 2019 with the target of reducing electricity and water by 2030. The other one is district cooling regulatory framework. The fourth one is waste to energy policy, which is basically support the UE effort in the circular economy and ensure that any waste-to-energy plants are built with proper principles and cost recovery requirements. The last but not least is the EV charging infrastructure policy, which we will talk about a bit in some details today. So the policy comes with some key objectives. First is basically to ensure EV charging infrastructure in public and private parking areas is available, and also monitored, affordable, safe to use, and accessible by all end customers. The second is to identify and integrate roles and responsibilities of key stakeholders within Abu Dhabi in the public and private parking areas, and also to enhance the preparedness of the electrical system in a coordinated way, building on the expertise and the systems already exist in place. And the fourth one is to define relevant license requirements, whether there is a requirement for a license or not, and to have a definition on the tariff that is applicable to EVSE, and also to set out principles of EV charging infrastructure, EV charging services. So the policy has three components, key components. One is the planning. First is the planning. Second is the electricity supply to EVSE. And the third one is principles in the EV charging services. When it comes to planning, the policy is not limited only to the EV charging, but it looks at it holistically from the new build perspective, to have an EV ready and EV SE ratio. And this is critical and important at the long term, where new builds will be equipped already with EV SE already with a specific ratio compared to the total number of parking. And also there will be an AV readiness requirement that will enhance, because when it comes to new build, it's cost efficient to have this already set up within the new build. So the policy has laid down that requirement, and this is something that will soon be materialized in specific codes and regulations. The second one is about having regular load demand assessment, forecast, and location planning. We have seen in previous panel discussion today about the importance of location planning, and this is something that was already captured, and the entity that is responsible as per the policy to look at this specific activity is the Parking Competent Authority, which is, you could say, the Integrated Transport Center. Now, the last but not least about the planning is to have all new residential developments to comply with the provision of EV ready requirements. This is a policy statement that there is ongoing progress to have a certain definition, a certain implementation on the EV and the applicability of each building. So very soon there will be hopefully an outcome from the current study. On the second part of the policy, when we talk about electricity supply to EVSE, the electricity supply to EVSE is regulated activity. It goes through the normal process. When you talk about EVSE, we talk about chargers. So EVSE is just an acronym of electric vehicle supply equipment, or in simple terms, chargers. So all EVSEs need to be connected to EVSE meters. And this is also important to be able to account for the tariff, that is supply tariff to EVSE, which is in Abu Dhabi is 30 fils per kilowatt hour. So this tariff is fixed as a supply tariff to the chargers. Now, obviously, the installations have to go through the distribution company as any other electrical installation in Abu Dhabi to make sure that the design and the installation is safe on the premise, safe on the people that is using those chargers. And on top of that, the EVSE has its own QCC requirements. QCC is Quality Conformity Council that issues certificates for equipment. So all these need to be complied with when it comes to electricity supply to EVSE. Now, these are basically the key, I would say, procedures and policies that are working together. So on the left side is the policy, then the electricity wiring regulations, which to ensure that the wiring is basically designed, approved, and installed and verified as per the standard. And then there is the conformity scheme that was issued by QCC. And also there is a distribution code which take into consideration any chargers that connected directly with the network. Well, the EV charging services in Abu Dhabi is something that is probably needs some explanation here. The charging from the or charging the cars is not considered as a resale of electricity. It's considered as providing a service. So hence, there is no operational license that the Department of Energy would require for any business that need to own and operate chargers within the Emirate of Abu Dhabi. The second is something that we introduce in the policy to make sure that all the chargers are accessible in Abu Dhabi. So all new chargers should not be limited to certain type of cars. As we could see in the past, some OEMs will have their own network that will charge their own cars. So this policy does not allow that for any new installation, to make sure that customers can go to any charging stations and can charge their own cars. And there are exceptions for that, of course, but this is the general rule that applies across the board. The third key element is that Parking Competent Authority, which is ITC, can provide a concession to any CPO to operate in public parking spaces, and this is a work in progress as we understand from the Parking Competent Authority. EVSE owners in private areas or appointed CPOs need to have a commercial license from the Department of Economic Development to be able to provide that commercial service. The last one, which is I think is very important, is that the EVSE owners or the CPOs can decide the price tariff, the pricing or the service level for the end customers. What we mean by that, the supply tariff to the chargers is 30 fils per kilowatt hour. However, the service rate that's given to the cars is left to the market to decide. And this is quite flexible in terms of the rate and in terms of either day by time or even a certain any other certain rate. So it's very flexible at the moment. And this also includes charging for free, by the way. So as we said, there has been a robust policy development in consultation with many stakeholders, government and private as well, that has led to the issuance of the policy last year. Now, currently we are in the phase of implementation. We have developed a RACI matrix that has captured all the responsibilities of the stakeholders within this policy. And you can see just a snapshot of how these entities work together under the EV charging infrastructure. This is just like a flow diagram. It shows for the public parking how the interactions happen between the different stakeholders. It's not here to explain everything, but this is available in the document. You can access the website. It's already available under Annex A. And it gives you a good understanding of how these entities work together, whether from the DOE, DMT, or ITC, DISCO, the distribution company, the CPO, and also the end customers, and how things start across the value chain of the infrastructure. With that, thank you very much for your attention, and hopefully we get to engage more with you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, hands together for Khalid. Thank you so much. Fantastic. So there we have it. We have more of more of an idea, flavour, and insight of the policy, what it means, and naturally the impact as well. Thank you so much. Right, we move steadily on. Moving steadily on. So it's been naturally looking at the region, looking at Abu Dhabi, and now what we're going to do, we're going to move away slightly, well not slightly, quite far away, over to Asia, in China in particular, looking at sustainability, looking at e-mobility, and how things kind of unfold in that area of the world, and looking at how potentially ideas, experiences can be used and not necessarily replicated, but clearly help maybe with the mindset of how things could be potentially done here. I'm intrigued again as much as you are really to hear what our next speaker has to share right now. Please welcome to the stage President and CFO of NAS Technology Incorporated from China, Mr. Alex Wu.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alex Wu. I'm the President and CFO of NAS Technology, a NASDAQ-listed charging service company. It's my great pleasure to be here this afternoon to talk to you about e-mobility of the future. My task here, apart from keeping everyone awake, is to tell you my view of the future. Right? I have this deep belief that the ICE to EV transition is not simply to have all the vehicles on the street converting to EV. Fundamentally, this is going to be a transition of energy supply system. And today, my job is to tell you what that transition is. So let's start from some numbers. And by the way, I'm going to throw a lot of numbers at you, so hopefully that's fine. We know the transition is happening, right? As of now, our global penetration rate has hit 14%, and it's going to hit 30% by 2025, and further to 60% by 2030. And I think the fact that you're all here is evidence of this trend happening. And we know in certain places there have already been regulations in place to stop ICE vehicles being registered by 2030. Now let's look at some more numbers. We know the world, there are three main markets for EV, and there are actually other markets as well, but currently there's three main markets for EV. I think there are a couple of things I want you to notice in these numbers. The first thing is the EV number versus public chargers. That's a ratio, right? You can see the US ratio is the highest, 16 vehicles to one public charger. EU ratio is the second, 14 EVs to one public charger. And the China ratio is the lowest, 10 EVs to one public charger. Why is that? I'm going to explain in a minute. But you can see that if we go further to 2030, that ratio for EU and for US are largely going to be kept the same, while in China, that ratio is going to go to 5:1, right? And why is that? Because China is mainly a public charging market, while US is mainly a private charging market, and EU is somewhere in the middle, where I would say half public charging, half private charging. Now, we did some homework as NAS, right? We want to understand how the world is evolving. So we know China is a mature, developed EV charging ecosystem. We know Europe is another mature one. So we did some homework. We compared the ecosystem of Europe versus the ecosystem of China. And the result is we found striking similarities between the two ecosystems. Without going into details, you can see we find similarities pretty much along the line. The only difference between Europe and China is the roaming provider. Obviously, in Europe, there are many countries. You will need to have a roaming service provider. In China, there's only one country, so there's no need for roaming. But the biggest takeaway we took from this is that we believe when a market matures from an EV charging perspective, the ecosystem would look quite similar. And that also gives us the confidence that we can take the best practice that we've accumulated in China to other parts of the world and help you grow your ecosystem. Now, if you look at the charging market I mentioned before, the charging volume and the charging type, US is clearly a private charging market. China is clearly a public charging market, where EU is somewhere in the middle. If you look at the chart on the right-hand side, the important thing is the public charging volume. So US public charging volume is going to grow about 16 times in 8 years. EU is going to grow about 6 times in 8 years. And China, that same volume, is going to grow 25 times in 8 years. That's a lot of growth for those that are interested in simple math, 25 times in 8 years. Now, this is an important slide. I always talk about the difference between ICE and EV, the transition, right? So let's think about it. Let's think about it from a logical perspective. What is the difference? There are two main differences. The first difference is what I call decentralization. Now, if I use the numbers in China as a comparison, China today has about 110,000 gas stations, right? That serves about 300 million ICEs in China. In about 20 years, when the ICE to EV transition is completed, it's expected China will need 3 to 4 million charging stations to serve the same 300 million vehicles. So if you look at it, it's quite interesting, right? We're talking about a 1 to 30 sort of a ratio. And if you look at the money that you're going to spend in each station, gas station versus charging station, there's like 100 times difference. So I always use this analogy of comparison, right? So gas station is like a shopping mall, where a charging station is like a convenience store. You're just going to have a lot more stations with less capex each, right? It's very important as a takeaway. The second thing is digitalization. We know petrol is a chemical product. It cannot be tracked, naturally, cannot be tracked. If you go to a gas station and do a refilling, the only point where you generate some level of data is when you get a receipt, and the payment system gives you some information. But charging is different. In China, for example, 90% of the charging stations are unmanned. You actually don't need an individual, a human being, to help you complete this transaction. Everything can be done online. Everything can be done digitally. And if you think about the charging gun itself, it's a digital IoT device. A lot of the data can be generated at the millisecond level on that gun. You can monitor the voltage, the current, the VIN number of the vehicle, the battery type of the vehicle. There's a huge amount of information and insights that can be generated from this kind of data. So if we put these two important characteristics together, decentralized and digitalized, that gives the opportunity for an integrator to have this information, collect the information, generate an insight, and generate the activities when you have the insight. That's only possible when you have a EV charging ecosystem. That's not possible in the ICE world. Now, this is what we as NAS foresee as the future of the energy supply. It is going to be what we call the Integrated Energy Port, or IEP, that has, from a charging perspective, has PV, has energy storage, has charging operations, but also has other types of energy services, together with some of the commercial areas. Okay, so I talked a bit about the trend. Let's talk about the company. We as NAS, as I said, is a NASDAQ-listed company. Here are some of the numbers that I would like to share with you. For NAS today, we manage 575,000 chargers, and most of them are DC fast chargers, 575,000 chargers. We manage 55,000 charging stations in China. And in 2022, 2,700 gigawatts of electricity was charged through the NAS network. What does that mean? Right, it's a big number. To put that into perspective, that's about 60% of all EU public charging volume. And that's about 3 times of the US public charging volume, 3 times. So we're talking about serious amount of energy. For China, NAS today is covering about 20% of all public charging volume in China, and it's the biggest service provider with the largest market share. From ESG perspective, NAS has helped carbon emission reduction of about 1.85 million tons in 2022. And what NAS does, I talk about integration, right? What kind of things are we integrating? So a life cycle of a charging station, and we're talking about a specialized charging station, not just one charging pile in a parking lot, is about 8 to 10 years. That's the life cycle of a charging station. And over that life cycle of 8 to 10 years, we as NAS provide 9 types of services through 3 stages of a life cycle: initial building stage, operation stage, and upgrade stage. We do all the things from big data-backed site selection, because we have a lot of data, as I mentioned before, to software procurement, to EPC turnkey construction. And during operation, we do traffic allocation, we do operating services, and we do maintenance services. Maintenance services is important because, as I said, in China there will be 5 million charging stations, 90% of them are unmanned. So you need some people to come in and check these things up, right? You need the electrician to come twice a month. You need a cleaner to come twice a week. So all these are backed by digital technologies that send requests to the labor service companies. And we also provide upgrade services. We provide things like energy storage services, PV services, and most importantly, virtual power plant services. Now, how do we put these things together? I will give you one example, which is quite interesting. I was talking to a senior government official in China, in Chongqing city, some of you might know. And he was complaining to me that he said last summer, summer of 2022, he spent the whole July basically driving around with a police car in front of him, going everywhere. What was he doing? He was trying to stop the charging stations from operation, because the whole city, the grid was under a lot of stress. So he wanted to stop all the charging stations from working, right? Because otherwise it put even more stress on the grid, which was already in pretty difficult situation. And I told him, I said, look, you don't have to do this, right? We can help you. What we can do is, because we cover so many charging stations, we cover so many customers, we can just set the charging price to a certain amount where people wouldn't come during the day. And at night, we can set the price to a lower level or even to 0, and people would come during the evening. It's something that can be easily done through a digital platform. We don't need to have a senior official driving around like a maniac, telling people not to go to charging, right? And this is the power of a digital system. And this is the power what we can do, and it's just the start of it that we can do when we have the capability to integrate drivers, when we have the capability to integrate the charging stations. And becomes better when we have the capability to leverage the peak and the valley electricity price, right? In China, as you know, and in some of the developed countries, the peak and the valley electricity price can have a pretty big gap. But how can you sort of help work it out? We have energy storage solutions together with virtual power plant that can build almost like a microgrid, right? Within our charging stations, we can use the energy storage to store electricity during the evening when the price is low, and we can use the energy storage to charge the vehicles during the day. And the asset owners, the CPOs, end up earning more money, and we provide services to them and we make revenues, right? This is a win-win situation, and the grid likes it. Grid loves it. The last thing that the grid wants to do is have a whole bunch of vehicles coming charging without any control, right? So this is something that does something good for everyone. Now finally, on the ESG, I talked before, in 2022, we've helped carbon reduction of 1.85 million tons. And for all the energies that were procured, all the electricity we procured, 90% of them are renewable energy. So we are obviously very serious in clean energy. And our target